valid. And remember, the caution was they are valid as long as they align to God's ultimate dream. And we know what God's ultimate dream is, that he would live with us, would be his people, and we would rule and reign with him. So all our dreams need to align to that. Today, we want to discuss birthing those dreams that are aligned to God. And you'll realize that most of our dreams, if we're aligned to God and walking with him, come from him. And so let's go through David's dream. And the first thing we want to see is just the journey he took in birthing his dream. So I want us to put up a diagram that will help us understand that journey. Now, let's simplify this. That is David's journey from the age of 15 to the age of 30. And it's basically the confidence that he had in the dream that God had given him. He was anointed at the age of 15. The bottom line there, you will see a green line, and you'll see age. So he gets anointed at the age of 15, and then do you see up to the age of 22? It's a very optimistic time, and things are going up for David. He gets into the palace and plays music for Saul, and then he kills he kills Goliath. Then he gets public recognition. He gets promoted in the army. He's one of the leaders, and everybody knows it is David who makes it happen on the battlefield. So that's up to the age of 22. Okay? At 22, because Saul is threatened, there's a sentence on David. He wants to kill him. His hope in the dream sinks completely, and then he meets Samuel after that. He went to him. And we'll talk more about these interactions. Along the way, he runs to the Philistines, who are enemies of Israel, for protection, and they reject him. And then he runs somewhere else, and his family hears that David is being hunted, and they all come to him, including an army of 600 men. That sort of raises his hope, and from there, he's running for his life up to the age of 28 and a half. And so he travels with this army of 600 men. Jonathan comes and inspires him. And then his mentor, the go-to person who anointed him, dies. That emboldened Saul now, and he goes after David with everything that he has. David recognizes that my anchor is gone, my protector is gone. David dumps the dream, and he makes a security deal with the Palestine. Wait a minute. With the Philistines. Those are very close. It can be risky where you are, eh? With the Philistines. So he makes a security deal with them. During that time when he has abandoned the dream, David is a cold-hearted, murderous, and deceptive person. And God picks him out of that mud and makes him king. So let's go through that story in more detail over the service. So, at the age of 15, Samuel is appointed. Go and anoint David to replace Saul, who has disobeyed me. David was the last born of 8. And according to the tradition then, he was forever going to be the family shepherd, whilst others moved on to agriculture and so on, and his older brothers moved on. And for him, that was his lot. That was what he was committed to. So what did Samuel do? Samuel said, bring me all your sons. And Jesse brought 7 of them. And God said, none of these. I'm not interested in them. Are these all the sons that you have? You know what? There's that little one. I don't know that he'd qualify. But anyway, if you insist, let's call him. And Samuel said, before he comes, I'm not sitting down. When he comes, God says, this is the man. I love his heart. Stand up and anoint him. And so he anoints him in Samuel chapter 2, 2 Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 16.
So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. About 20 years later, God will tell David in 2 Samuel 7, verse 8, I took you from the pasture and from tending the sheep and made you leader of my people, Israel.
God took him from what was a lowly profession to lead his people in the capacity of king. How does this apply to you? Your calling in life, your dream in life, is not limited to your history, it's not limited to your circumstances. It is directed by the dream that God has on his heart for you. And so we should not be limited by, this is who I am, this is what has happened to me, therefore this is what life is going to be. So as an application, we need to ask God, where I am here, is this all that I have? Can I trust you for more? What do you really want for me? So, you're a boy, you're anointed, 15 years old, what do? Kingship is so far, it's way beyond your imagination. He goes back to the sheep as a shepherd. We can trust God once he gives us a dream for him to fulfill that dream, for him to set up a process, set up events that will get us to where we need to go, because there was nothing he could do from where he was. And so God sets up a process. And the first one he does is that he makes Saul a madman, because that's how he behaves a lot of the time. The Spirit of God has left him, and evil spirits have invaded him, and he needs music to soothe him. And it just so happens that one of the servants of Saul knew a boy. And who was that boy? It was David. And so in 1 Samuel chapter 16, we read,
I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him.
Those are the qualities in a teenager. So those who are mentoring, those who stood up here and committed themselves, look at those qualities in there and aim at those for the people that you're mentoring. 3 years later, the Goliath will confront the Israelites, and they're all so scared. 40 days he is walking around and challenging Israel to produce a man to fight him. And so that story is in Samuel chapter 17, and David comes up to Saul and says, I am going to fight this giant. Let's read that verse.
Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God.
So that is David, a young adult of 18 years old, who brought down Goliath with a stone and a sling. Look at the language of confidence. Look at his faith in God. Now, all of us live in an era where everybody proclaims to be a self-made man, self-made woman. From rags to riches, this is how I made it, and so on. David is not one of those self-made people, and all of us are not. He had people in his life who taught him all these things. Somebody must have taught him how to play that instrument and insisted that he plays it well and plays it properly. Somebody taught him how to use the sling and the stone. These things don't come instinctively, they don't come naturally. There was somebody there working with him, showing him how to do it. And then, the last one, somebody taught him how to confront a lion and a bear. A lot of us, when a dog comes out of a compound, we dash. And that's a dog. But this is a guy who can look a lion in the face and a bear in the face and confront it. Somebody taught him those things. He practiced them. All of you know he did his 10,000 hours in them in order to get so skilled. And he did them in private where people were not watching him. Then the Spirit of the Lord comes, on him. And the Spirit of the Lord takes everything that had been invested in David and brings them into this defining moment where he's managing the rise of David to now public life. So, we may be thinking we're teaching math, we're teaching an instrument, we're teaching football, and so on. We do not know how God will take what we're doing, what we're teaching, what we're training people in, and deploy those skills and energize them by the Holy Spirit to do his purpose and his will. Okay? And so let us just stay in there, knowing that God has called us to that. Let us invest in it and leave the rest to God. As we can see, David was really spiritually prepared for this moment. David has a rich spiritual heritage. Now, Jesse, his father, must have told him about the stories of Naomi, how Naomi rebelled, and how she received redemption and restoration. Stories about Ruth, how she left her gods and became a believer, and how she met Obed, and Obed happened to be a righteous man, a loving person, a faithful servant of God. So David has that going for him in terms of just where he's coming from. But the most significant testimony, the most significant help, spiritual help, that David had, would you guess who it is? It was his mother. And in the Psalms, twice, he talks about his mother. Psalms 68.
Turn to me and have mercy on me. Show your strength in behalf of your servant. Save me because I serve you, just as my mother did.
Yeah, and just as my mother did. Yesterday, we went to Nairobi Chapel, Ngong Road, and I've been there before to close a teens seminar, and let me tell you the numbers. Out of the 39 parents who attended the previous one, only 5 were dads. 5 fathers came, okay? And mothers are coming for their sons. This is like the David story, okay? David does not mention his dad, Jesse. I'm not saying anything about it, but I'm just saying it doesn't mention. Do we want to get a mention as men in our fathers' lives? We need to be there with them. Stories will be told about us. And I'm sure you people do that because I do that with my children. I tell them stories about their father, who is their grandfather, who is my dad. I tell them stories about my grandmother, who is their great-grandmother, okay? It's just some of these things that we do. And we emphasize what was important about them, what they did for us in our lives. So let us know, for good or bad, for better, for worse, stories are going to be told. That's very sobering. And our children will just tell them naturally. So I sit here and I stand here and wonder, what will my children tell their children about me? What will they tell them? Now, it doesn't matter what age you are at, we have a window of opportunity. Naomi turned around when everything was finished. Ruth was in a disastrous situation, but she was rescued from it by going to God. So we can turn our story around, that we will have a story that will be able to be told, that will encourage our children and build their faith on the many generations. After killing Goliath, David is recruited into Saul's army. And I want us to read from 1 Samuel 18.
1 Samuel 18:2. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. Continues to say in verse 5, whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well.
So David has had 5 years. He's really doing well, and his name is a household name. In every house, on dining table, kitchen, in the marketplace, women are just talking about this young man, David, who's come to rescue us. And so everybody's excited about David. Nobody's talking about Saul anymore. So one day, when they're coming from one of the victories and there's celebration, the women celebrate. And they sing and they dance. And that is in Samuel 18. This is what they say.
Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David.
So David is rated 10 times better than Saul, who has been around a long time and actually has fought many battles. And then they credit this young man with so much, and he's just come recently. His position and his dynasty is threatened. And therefore, he makes it his aim to kill David in order to maintain his dynasty. And so he'd throw spears at him when he was playing music, and he would duck and so on. Yeah? That is when his real problems began, at that point in time. For the next 8 years, David is running for his life until the age of 30. Can you imagine? This was meant to be a great dream, and now this is what has become of it. When we get into a dream, and all of you have dreams, and if you do Zindua, you're going to bring together dreams in every area for the next 20, for the next 30 years. What will happen is that those dreams may run into a problem at some point. God does not usually tell you what happens in that territory between the vision and its accomplishment. That is his business, in there, what he will do and how he will prepare you. And it is a bitter pill that David had to swallow in order to get to kingship. And we will have to go through that territory, which we're not aware of. We're excited about the vision, we're excited about the end of it, but now we need to brace ourselves for the in-between. And you guys have lived long enough, you've had dreams, and you've had visions about where God wants to take you. Question: do you have a dream that's run into problems? It's not what you anticipated it to be? Are there people who favored you and have now turned against you? Is your rise and further growth threatening somebody? We need to be like David, and God needs to come through to us, and help us go through that difficult period. And to acknowledge that difficult period is God ordained. It is part of the process in order to get to actualize the vision. God sent into David's life what you'd call dream makers. Some call them destiny helpers. And there's quite a number of them. We'll go through 6 of them quickly. One is Samuel, Saul, his own family, with 600 rebels, Jonathan, Abigail, and the choice of last resort for God was the Philistine generals, and we'll look at that. The first person he goes to when he's attacked, quite naturally, is Saul. Saul is Samuel. Samuel is sort of his grandfather because of their age difference and so on. He is nationally revered and he's just so feared by everyone. When he came into a town, people would ask him, "Hey, do you come in peace?" That's the kind of guy he was. He had judged Israel for 52 years, and then he gave over the leadership to his children to become judges. Unfortunately, they were corrupt, and Israel asked for a king. So he anointed he anointed Saul, and Saul failed. So that's the second failure. My children cannot be leaders. The leaders are anointed. The leader anointed in Saul failed. Okay? Now David, who are anointed after Saul, is running for his life. Okay? So that is what the old man is going through in his late 80s, thereabouts. And so David comes to him. "You anointed me. Samuel, is this part of the plan? Are you sure you really heard from God?" And we go through those moments when we say, "Did I really hear from God? Maybe I heard my own voice. Maybe the vision was mine. Maybe I really wanted that thing, but it is not of God." "Samuel, can you protect me?" We look for people who can protect us, people who can help us understand. And Samuel does protect him. Saul comes after him, and he's subdued by Samuel's spiritual power. We need to look at Samuel and see how our faithfulness can be used by God. He will not see David become king because he will die 4 years before David is king. How does he evaluate his life? Really, I have had failure after failure after failure. But that's not true. God counts on our faithfulness, not necessarily on our success. So we need to commit to faithfulness as we help people out, as we do the things that God has called us to do, knowing that we will be judged by faithfulness. 400 years later, God affirms Samuel. He puts him at par in the book of Jeremiah together with Moses. None of us has got 400 years to wait to be affirmed. But we need to have that mindset that it is my faithfulness that counts. Whether I get success or not, it doesn't really, well, it does matter, but I have to make sure that I remain faithful. Especially in a success-oriented world like we have, and even in a success-oriented church like we have, yeah? If I don't see fruit, if I don't submit the numbers, where am I? What do I feel? We have to go with Mother Teresa. God has not called us necessarily to be successful, but to be faithful and gain the strength to do that. The second person who God brought into into David's life was Saul as a destiny helper, which is actually surprising. You don't think he helped him. You wouldn't think that way, okay? Saul makes it his number one priority to kill David. So if he's not fighting the Philistines, he's fighting David. 300 men to go and look for this little boy, yeah? So those were his two things that he was doing. So a very divided man, okay? Saul was the furnace that God had prepared for David. He was the furnace that God needed in order to prepare David for kingship. How did he do it? He shaped David's character just through the perseverance. Remember, it's going to be 8 years of this that Saul is going to be after him. The perseverance David needed to have was shaped through Saul. Secondly, through those 8 years, He learned dependence on God for provision and protection. Again, if somebody's after your life, you need to look to God. He learned to leave matters of justice to God. And if you're going to lead, if you're going to be good for that vision, you've got to believe in the justice of God. There is this statement in the New Testament, justice is mine, I will repay. If you want the best example in the Bible, it is David. He gets an opportunity to deal with Saul, but he leaves it to God. David also learned to trust in God's timing. For Saul to die one day, and then he would take over the leadership. So that was the furnace that God put David in. Question: who is threatening to kill your dream? I'm sure you have a person or a set of circumstances in your mind. There's a vision that you have, and somebody standing in the way of it. Could it be that God, through this obstacle, through this person, through these circumstances, is shaping your heart for that eventual dream that you'll have? They're not actually in the way. They are shaping your heart for it. How does it change the way I deal with that relationship, the way I deal with that circumstance, knowing that it is actually my ally that I need in order to get there in the way God wants me to? The third was his family. David is being hunted. He runs to the cave of Abdullam, and his brothers, his sisters, and his household come to him. Family first will always come. Even those that were not anointed, that were wondering what he's doing here, came to him. Notable among them were his nephews. One of them is Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. These men would be with David throughout his life, and they would lead his army. Now, the most interesting one here is the army of rebels that God gave David to protect him. And they are in 1 Samuel 22.
All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him, among them evil men and troublemakers.
Those are the kind of men that God gave David to lead and to protect him. You know, David had fought in Saul's army, and they are men who had fought for a long time, who were trained, who were disciplined, always on the move, and they were paid, to do this. This is not the kind of army that he was used to. People who are in distress, debt, discontented, evil, troublemakers. Can you imagine the number of fights that he had with these 600 men? Don't put in their children and their wives to the 3,000 people. It is a mess managing these people. But stop and think about that. David is going to be judge when he becomes king. Isn't this the best lab for him to go through? Isn't this the best practice for him to go through for 8 years? Because people are going to be coming to him. Give me judgment, give me judgment. Oh man, the guy has seen the worst from the most evil, of people. So, the people that God gives us, what is God calling us to into their lives, and what is God doing in our lives? David's mind was clear as he led these people. He needed to raise them to God's standard and get them to know him. He taught them to submit to God's authority and to wait for God's timing. People who are really rough, trouble, they don't know how to wait. That's why they got into this trouble and this kind of character. But David taught them to wait on God's timing and submit to his authority. So David's mentorship goals were very clear as he dealt with this group. And as an example, he consistently refused to kill Saul, even when he had the opportunity. And we can read that in 1 Samuel 24.
A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back from the cave. The men said, "This is a day the Lord spoke of when he said this to you. I will give you your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish." Then David crept up and noticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." With these words, David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way.
So that's an example of David controlling, training his people. And it's an interesting thing is that his people can actually quote scripture that justifies us doing this thing. It means that you also have to know your scriptures very well and balance them out in order to do God's will. When David becomes king, these people will be amongst the 37 mighty men who could really do all kinds of exploits. These were the men whom God did, what God did was appoint them to get Israel to the territory that he wanted it to get to. And David got Israel to its largest territory ever through these kinds of people and others who will come to him. Amongst them were Joab and Abishai, who are the first followers and who are his nephews. Let us look at again the kind of people that God brings around us. Look at Jesus. He gathered around himself people who are rough, rejects of society, nobody wants to be around them or associated with them, including, and people he prayed for, including Judas, who God had planted in there amongst the 12 to fulfill his purpose for Jesus. Apart from Judas, these men went on to change the world. Think about the people you have prayed, have come your way, and God has given them to you. And they were called uneducated, ordinary, people. Think about the undesirable people that David had around him. Could they be called to your purpose in life? Could they be the people God has placed to help us and help you accomplish your purpose? How do you begin to look at them? And we have a great example in David. We have a great example in Jesus. That shakes the way we think about people we come across and people who are in our lives. And people are always the problem for us. But in God's eyes, they are an asset. And we see even in Jesus' group, they were assets. Those people who are really rough and unwanted by society. The next person who will help him is Jonathan, and we know a lot about him. He's the eldest son of Saul, and he's the crown prince. After David kills Goliath, Jonathan's heart is just so connected with David. Wow, this giant roamed around here for 40 days, and none of us had the guts to take him on. And then this young boy comes, he brings him down. And we read this and as a gesture, as a symbol of Jonathan's appreciation, the story is told there in 1 Samuel 18.
So Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt.
Now, that exchange there is very significant. Jonathan was saying, I recognize I am the crown prince. I am next to the throne after my father. But I think this is God's choice. This is the man who will take Israel where it needs to go. And I am willing to submit to God's choice give up my place on the throne next, and work under this man. But this is the amazing humility. We normally think David and Jonathan are peers, they're buddy-buddy, and so on. Jonathan is David's senior by at least 11 years. Other people put him even higher, into the 20-plus years. So here is a man submitting to a person who's younger than him because he is God's choice. But in doing that, Jonathan was taking a risk. Whenever anybody came into power, he completely killed the family that was ruling in the past in order to eliminate the threat of a coup and so on, and you can understand that. And so he made a covenant with him that when you become king, you will keep my family safe. And we even see Saul doing that later on with David. Now, that was a future issue they settled on. They made an agreement. They signed on the dotted line. But Jonathan still has a big problem presently, and that is his father Saul, and they're on a collision course. Because Saul wants his dynasty to remain with David against the will of God, who took him from there, who told him, you will not, your family will not go through. And so Saul insists on Jonathan disobeying God. 1 Samuel chapter 20.
For as long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him.
That's the madman we have here, wants to kill his son. Anyway, what was he doing? He was risking his life for God's purpose. Jonathan must have been very, very deep in his relationship with God. It wasn't about David. It was about God's purpose, that he was ready to risk his life and be that courageous. Sometimes afterwards, Saul, again, this has become one of his obsessions, went out hunting for David, and his son slipped away, Jonathan, and went to David and affirmed him secretly, because he could not be seen going publicly. It's subversion. We're looking for this guy, and you, my son, are going to tell him. What are you going to tell him? And so in 2 Samuel 23, we hear what Jonathan did to affirm David.
Saul's son, Jonathan, went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Do not be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this.
Two things to note there. One is that Jonathan helped him find his strength in God. You know, we tell our children, I know you can do it. You've shown you can do it before. And you help them find strength in their past, in their experience, and so on. You've got what it takes. No. Help people find strength in God. Again, you're not there all the time to encourage them. Yeah? And the second thing is that he's so convinced about God's purpose to the point that he can say, my dad is coming for you. He's going to hunt you down, but my father Saul will not lay a hand on you, not because he can't, but because God will protect you and you will be king. As a point of reflection, Jonathan leaves his comfort zone. He gives up things that should be his. Are we able to leave our comfort zone? And let me get this, our future ambitions, to ensure that the purpose of God is accomplished in the life of another, and that God is calling me to do this. May seem like we're going too far, but take your children, for instance. Am I ready to decline that promotion that will keep me away 24/7, traveling all over the world, and my children don't have my attention? To cut that back means I am cutting down my ambitions. I am toning them down so that my children can live in the purpose of God and what God has called them to. And so this is stuff we can do. This is stuff we need to do. Am I taking time? Am I taking resources to invest in other people? You know, ministry is time, ministry is resources. You could be using that time to do other stuff. Am I scaling down in order for those other people to enter their purpose and dream that God has for them? And that's something, it's not about us. It's about what is God doing in that, and that life. Am I called to do that? What is the price that I have to pay? And if we begin to look around, we will know that God has a call on our lives and we need to do something. Let's go on to Abigail as a helper. Samuel has just died. And as we showed in that diagram, the dark side of David begins to present itself. It begins to come out. And this is played out when he meets this very colorful couple. The husband is called Nabal, described as a wealthy man, but he was crude and mean in all his dealings. You know, it's this guy who couldn't give away a shilling, to anybody. And he was very crude to go with that. He wasn't even nice about it. And then his wife is described, Abigail, as sensible, intelligent, a beautiful woman. You wonder how these two guys got together. Did they miss our Ndoa class, our marriage? Did they go into any counseling for some tell them, you guys, I don't think you're going to hack it, at all. Anyway, they're together, and let's leave it there. So, whilst David is running away from Saul, he finds this large flock, goats and sheep, and he looks after them, protects them, and so on. And then sheep shearing time comes, where people rejoice, and money is now being made, and there's feasting, and so on. So David says, Nabal, I've looked after your sheep, nothing is missing, I looked after your shepherds, give us something to eat. Now, this is how difficult David's life is. 3,000 people need to be kept, fed. Now, this mean guy who is crude gives him this answer in 1 Samuel 25.
Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my sharers and give it to men coming from who knows where?
Okay. That is our man Nabal. David, of course, is really incensed. He's so angry. And he responds with violent intent. This is the first time he's really doing that. He says, may God deal with David, be it so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to Nabal. What have the other guys done? Done nothing. He has a problem with Nabal, but he is going to shed innocent blood. He intends to do this for the first time. And this is not the only time it's going to happen. When he's in exile, he's going to kill women and children. So you see this dark side, coming out. But his wife is intelligent. She hears. She knows her husband, yeah? And she hears stories from the servants. Is this new? No. Okay. And so, being intelligent, she rides out quickly with sufficient food and apologizes on behalf of her husband. You guys note that. Apologizes on behalf of her husband. 1 Samuel 25. Let's listen to what she says.
Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight for the Lord's battles. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or having avenged himself. So continues to say in 1 Samuel 25 from verse 32. David listened to God's voice through Abigail. Praise be to the Lord. the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands.
Do you see how God plants people in David's life in order to keep him pure for the dream that he has for him, so that he has a clear conscience? Why were these two guys, Nabal and Abigail, so different? Very obvious. Abigail was a godly person in touch with God's purposes, those of other people, and David also. Nabal saw facts on the ground as they were. This guy is a rascal. He's running away from Saul. He's a nobody. Facts as they are, right now. Whilst Abigail has eyes of faith that see beyond the facts on the ground. Is that us as we deal with people? The facts on the ground only? Or do we have eyes of faith that sees what God has called them to? So we need people like Abigail in our journey. We need to be like Abigail to other people. We need to be able to be bold. We need to be able to confront. We need to be wise and courageous. And so we need to pray that God will connect us with such people in our lives who will affirm us and keep us focused on His purpose and save us from embarrassment and difficulty in the future. So we need to be these kinds of people in other people's lives. So finally, at the age of about 28 and a half, because there's 14 months to the kingship, David abandons the dream. But it's very surprising, he abandons the dream when he's just had a lot of success. God affirms him, and then he abandons the dream. 1 Samuel chapter 26.
So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul, lying asleep inside the camp with his spear struck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, "Today, God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get a spear and water jug that are near his head, and let's go." So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep.
So David takes away this stuff, goes across the valley, and then he shouts, wakes up Saul, and there's a story in there. And he says, "The Lord delivered you into my hand today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed." There he is again, leaving everything in God's hand. So Saul, being embarrassed, "Oh, my son, you've done well, you know you'll be great," and so on, abandons the hunt for David, and he goes away. Something happens to David immediately after that. And then David thought to himself, "One of these days I will be destroyed by Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand." What is happening in David's mind? David thought to himself. David is a man of prayer. He always prays for guidance. But now, things are happening in his mind. He thought to himself, "You know what? I could be killed one of these days by Saul." What is David really saying? David is saying, Saul has the power to block God's dream by killing me. That's basically what he's declaring, that Saul is able to override God's dream for my life. He had been affirmed by Jonathan, who said, "You will be king, and my father cannot lay his hands on you because you are protected by God." So in his mind, and we need to be careful about what's happening, in our minds. He just decided, I don't think God can succeed against Saul. So now let me start taking care of myself. Now, why did David feel this way? And just think about it. For 6.5 years, his life has been, I could be killed anytime. We're worried I could be broke anytime, I could miss food anytime, the KRA will catch up with me, those kinds of things. But this is a guy who's worried about I could be speared from the back and I could, die. He has 600 men, together families, 3,000 people. They need to be fed. He needs to maintain justice. They need to be protected. And I've also got animals and herds and so on. So this is really just an amazing logistical job he has to do. Okay? So, as you would expect, fatigue begins to take its toll on David's faith. And we can understand after 6.5 years of this. So we need to be careful. What do we do with fatigue when we get in there? And it runs counter to what God is telling us. And David feared for his life. Fear, we need to identify it, can do wonders for us. So those two things, I believe, got David to say, I think there's an easier way out of this. Let me go where Saul can't reach me. He has to go through the Philistines first. I don't have to live by faith in God's protection anymore. I am protected behind the Philistines. That's the decision that David took. And sure enough, when Saul was told that David has fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. And so David was at peace, when he was in Philistine. What he didn't know, when he got exhausted, when he got fatigued, when he lost faith, he was 1 year, 4 months away from the death of Saul and the kingship. So are you exhausted? Are you fatigued? Are you looking for an easier way out? You don't know. The breakthrough could just be around the corner. And so needing to hang in there. Yeah? Now, the easier way proved very difficult and costly for David, this shortcut he was taking, because he becomes completely lost. He's totally disoriented. David physically left the presence of God in Israel and also spiritually left. He became cold-hearted, he became deceptive, he became cruel. They'd go and raid other tribes, and he would kill not only the men, but women and children as well. And the story is in Samuel 27, if you want to know the details. David killed women and children. You don't do this during war. That's how far spiritually David had declined by taking the easy way out, by not living by faith. 14 months down the road, the Philistines want to go to war against Israel. And so Achish, the king of the Philistines, one of the Philistines, tells David, hey, you are going to go into battle with me. You've been having a good time, you've been doing your raids, you've got a lot of wealth. It's time for you to fight now. David is so lost, he would say to Achish, then you will see for yourself what your servant can do. Achish is very happy, so he replies, very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life. That's how far David had strayed, willing to go with the Philistines into war with Israel, his own people, whom he was meant to be king over. Okay? He was going to be party to the army that would kill the Lord's anointed, Saul, and his friend Jonathan. Now he has abandoned the dream. Now he has committed himself to a war. There is no turning back. He's out of reach. God comes in to rescue his dream and to rescue David from his folly. It is God who did this, and he took idol worshippers, the Philistine commanders, to do this. God will use anything at his disposal to protect his dream and his purpose. And let's read in 1 Samuel 19.
1 Samuel 29, verse 4. But the Philistine commanders were angry with Achish and said, "Send the man back. He must not go without us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men?"
You know, we get worried about people who are out of reach, people who are, not walking in the purpose that we believe God has for them and the things that we have taught them. But God can use anybody he needs to get that person back. I'm sure his mother in Moab, I'm sure Prophet Gad in Israel were all praying for David in Gath. What is he doing with Goliath's brothers? I'm sure they were praying for him, and God ultimately came to rescue his dream. And so, the tribe of Judah come to Hebron and then anoint David as king. Yes, you're now king, but the shine is taken off because of that 14 months when you acted foolishly and didn't live by faith, and it's a very humbling thing, but it's an encouragement to us, I believe, that even in our folly and our lack of faith, and in the folly and lack of faith of the people that we love, God is able to come through and not compromise his dream for them. I want us to pray for ourselves and for the people that we love. Let's take a moment. Father, thank you so much for your goodness. Thank you that you give us dreams, you give us visions of where you want us to go in this life and what you want us to fulfill for you and your people. Thank you for the people that help us along the way to realize that dream. But today, we want to thank you for the difficult people. We want to thank you for the obstacles. We want to thank you for those that endanger our vision and even our very lives. And may we see them as people whom you have sent into our lives. May we be able to know how to navigate how we feel about them, how we feel about you, and the vision that you've given us for the future. But above all, God, we want to pray that we would not be in a situation like David, where we abandon the dream and our hearts become hard and we become calloused. And we do things that we even can't believe it afterwards. So help us, Lord, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.